What is up, fantasy football fam? It's your boy BDE, and we got you today on a fantastic tight end week 4 start sit video. We're going to break it down in tiers. We're going to tell you guys where the matchups are advantageous and who is going to be a smash start, not just in your fantasy football lineups, but also in the DFS slates. Who is a definitive sit, somebody you don't want in your freaking lineups, and some absolutely incredible, juicy betting props. Shout out to our sponsors, Bettor Vision. Download it. It's free. It's the best place to sweat your fantasy football, your betting lineups, your DFS lineups, your best ball lineups, all in one place. So you don't have 60 million apps open. It's just one app, and you could sweat everything simultaneously. If you guys have not subscribed to the channel, please do so. So without further ado, let's get into the first game. We got the Seattle Seahawks, who are 1.5-point favorites, coming into Arizona. The over-under is 43.5. The game kicks off on Thursday. This is a Thursday night football game. And let's talk about where it's advantageous. For example, the Seattle Seahawks allow the most receptions to tight ends on average at 8 receptions per game. They allow the 7th most, they're tied at 7th for the most receiving yards to tight ends at 60. And they allow the most, they're tied for the most receiving touchdowns to opposing tight ends at 1 receiving touchdown. So this is a fantastic matchup for Trey McBride. And then Arizona, on the other hand, they allow the 2nd most receptions at 7 per game, and they're tied for 7th most receiving yards with the Seattle Seahawks for 60 yards. So this is a fantastic matchup for Mr. Barner, but there are so many other mouths to feed. That is not his name and could potentially be a ramp up for Elijah Arroyo. But nevertheless, we got Trey McBride in the S tier, and I understand if you want to start AJ Barner, he is going to be in our D tier, but honestly, he's somebody who I wouldn't recommend starting, and there's not a lot of names I would recommend starting him on, and he's not a fantastic DFS play because, I mean, other than doing the single DFS slates, he's not somebody who's special. All right, next game. We got the Minnesota Vikings against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Game kicks off 9:30 a.m. in Dublin. The Vikings are 2.5-point favorites. The over-under is 41 in that game. So let's talk about where it's advantageous. The Minnesota Vikings give up a below average production to tight end, so it's not advantageous. And the usage within the Arthur Smith system makes both Jonnu and Muth enticing but borderline impossible to project for because they get an increase of usage, but we never know who it's going to be. As of now, Jonnu Smith is out snapping Pat Freiermuth, but it's very negligible, the difference between the snaps. I still like Freiermuth as the higher touchdown upside guy, but once again, I cannot rely on either one of them. Whereas on the other side, the Pittsburgh Steelers allowed the 10th most receptions to opposing tight ends at 5.67, the 6th most receiving yards at 70.33, the 5th most yards per reception at 12.41, so that's explosives, and they're tied for first for most receiving touchdowns at 1 per game. This is an advantageous matchup across the board for TJ Hawkinson, and to add to how fantastic this matchup is for him, we got Jordan Addison coming back from suspension, who is going to take away the 2nd best defender, passing or catching defender on the Pittsburgh Steelers. So this is a fantastic matchup for TJ Hawkinson. TJ Hawkinson is going to be in the B tier just because I don't trust Carson Wentz. And we see the Pittsburgh Steelers improving. As for Pat Freiermuth and Jonnu Smith, they're both going to be E's, which is sit. We're going to sit them. All right, next game, we got the Carolina Panthers. They are 5.5-point underdogs coming into New England. The over-under is 43 points. And let's talk about what Carolina allows. They are tied for the 5th most targets allowed to tight ends at 7.67, the 5th most receptions allowed to tight ends at 6. They allow the most receiving yards to tight ends at 74 receiving yards per game, and the 6th most yards per reception at 12.33. This is a smash move for Hunter Henry. He's a fantastic start. Whereas New England, they allowed the 8th most receptions to that tight ends at 56.67. We have Ja'Tavion Sanders here, and hopefully he's healthy and ready to go. So that's a smash matchup for receiving yards to opposing tight ends for Ja'Tavion Sanders, should he start. And the 3rd most yards per reception to tight ends, which is a fantastic betting prop and betting line to hit the over on Ja'Tavion Sanders' longest reception. So Ja'Tavion Sanders is in that D tier with AJ Barner, and we're going to put Hunter Henry in the A tier because he was the tight end 1 last week, and he was absolutely fantastic. I don't remember if he was a tight end 1 or if it was Mark Andrews. I believe he was a tight end 1. He was fantastic, and this is another smash matchup for him. And the wide receivers don't get a lot of production, and the quarterbacks don't get a lot of production, but the tight ends do get a lot of production. There's a lot of opportunity there. Let's look into the next game right now. We got the Cleveland Browns, who are 9-point underdogs coming into Detroit. The over-under is 44.5. You got David Njoku against Sam Laporta. I'm a Laporta supporter, and the mustache looks phenomenal. All right, so the Cleveland Browns don't allow much production when it comes to any sort of quantifiable, measurable statistical category. Holy crap, what a lot of words. But what they do allow is 0.67 touchdowns to opposing tight ends, which is tied with a bunch of teams for second most, which is very enticing for Sam Laporta, which I like him as a start. And Sam Laporta within that scheme, the usage is reliable early and often, and we have yet to see the real end zone equity come in for him. We've just seen a bunch of conversions, but he has been reliable and the usage has been very enticing. This is probably the better matchup for him to be used in. Detroit, on the other hand, allows the 10th most receiving yards to tight ends at 54.67, 9th most yards per reception at 11.71, tied for most TDs allowed per game to tight ends at 1 per game on average. So I like David Njoku. I like Harold Fannin. I love Sam Laporta. Sam Laporta is a B tier to S tier start every single week. We're going to put David Njoku in the C tier. I would add Harold Fannin in the E or D tier, somewhere in there. There's a lot of better options than him this week, and we'll get into it. But Sam Laporta's in the B tier, and we like both of these tight ends in this matchup. They're both spectacular tight ends. And in this next matchup, we don't like either tight end, but we got to talk about it. The LA Chargers are 6.5-point favorites coming into New York against the New York Giants. The over-under is 44. And I will say this, the only thing that's going for Theo Johnson is the fact that there's a rookie quarterback in at the helm. And we saw Greg Dulcich and Jackson Dart connection in the preseason, but that's not enough for me to be bullish on Theo Johnson moving forward. But there is that possibility. So he could be a decent DFS play, but there's no world on any planet in any other scenario and situation where Theo Johnson's the starter. As for Rondé Gatson, he doesn't get the most receptions, the most targets, or the most snaps. But I will say this, there is a vacancy in terms of where it's advantageous for tight ends. And the Giants allow the third most receptions to opposing tight ends, and they're tied in that region for 6.67. But definitely don't start anyone in that game. Both of these guys are E tiers, borderline sits, if not definitive sits for sure. Next game, we got the New Orleans Saints and shocker of the year, Mr. Juwan Johnson. He's been phenomenal. Even on an off game, he's still putting up double-figure production in week 3. The Saints are 16-point underdogs coming into Buffalo. The over-under is 48. So let's talk about where this is a bit advantageous. The Saints they're tied for the 8th most receptions at 55.33 to opposing tight ends. Imagine 53. They allow 5.33 receptions to opposing tight ends. So tied 8th there. And they allow 51.67 receiving yards, which is just above average. Whereas Buffalo allows the least receptions to opposing tight ends at 1.67 and 9.69 yards per reception, which is the 12th most. So when we're looking at targets and what is happening for Juwan Johnson, he is being favored early and often. He's being hyper-focused, even though it's not an advantageous matchup. We still like him in the A tier because he's been very, very good at football. As for Dalton Kincaid, he could very easily be an S tier guy, but there are too many mouths to feed, and this game is going to be a blowout. If the Seattle Seahawks can make that game a blowout, then the Buffalo Bills can most certainly do it as well. And we're not taking away anything from the Seattle Seahawks. All right, next game. And this game is very, very, very enticing. So please listen carefully when I talk about this game, especially when I talk about Cade Otton, okay? So the Philadelphia Eagles, coming off of their third win in a fantastic comeback fashion scenario where a blocked field goal won the game. It didn't win the game, but it definitely didn't lose it on because it could have lost due to the field goal. Stop rambling, Disco. Just talk about the fucking game. I will. Okay, stop. All right, the over-under is 44. Tampa Bay Buccaneers are hosting this matchup. And Tampa Bay doesn't really allow a lot of production. Philadelphia doesn't really allow a lot of production. But the one shining light, and this is why I kind of like Cade Otton and why I think he's one of the better under the radar waiver wire acquisitions right now. Because if you look at the splits historically, when Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are when one is either missing or both are out, Cade Otton splits becomes elite tight end usage, and he has nuke fantasy football production potential. He's going to be one of my favorite DFS tight ends this week. I'm not starting him in redraft format, but he is definitely a 100% must target waiver wire asset. As for Dallas Goedert, like I like the reliability I believe he's been the most consistently targeted tight end in that receiving room. He's just been the most consistently targeted receiving weapon for Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles. So with that being said, I'm putting them both in the C tier. One has a fantastic opportunity where he has the reliability, and the other one is literally the second best receiving target in that game. A game I absolutely hate. I despise this. Both of these guys are definitive sits. We got the Tennessee Titans, who are 7-point underdogs coming into Houston. The over-under is 30.5. But we got to tell you guys, especially for betting possibilities, where there's an opportunity to cash, and Houston allows the eighth most. They're tied for allowing the eighth most receptions to opposing tight ends at 5 receptions per game. But across the board, this is a terrible matchup for tight ends. Both defenses are really good. So I mean, I understand if you want to play Chigo Okonkwo because Calvin Ridley's not existing. He's going to be in the D tier. So somebody who I wouldn't recommend starting, in Dalton Schultz is a sit for sure. They're both sittable, in my opinion. All right, next game. I do like this matchup. I do like this matchup a lot, and we'll talk about it. We got the Washington Commanders coming off of victory. They are 1-point favorites against the Atlanta Falcons. Still no definitive response on if Jaden Daniels will be healthy or not, but let's talk about where this is advantageous. For starters, it's not advantageous for Zach Ertz and the Washington Commanders, but the only thing in Zach Ertz's favor is it doesn't matter if the matchup is advantageous or not. When Jaden Daniels is at the helm, the splits are remarkable. The target share and opportunity is there. If Jaden Daniels starts, he's a must start. If Jaden Daniels misses, he's a must sit. So that's where we're going to caveat there. On the other side, the Washington Commanders allowed the 5th most receiving yards at 71 receiving yards to opposing tight ends, despite only allowing the 17th most receptions at 4.67 receptions per game to the position. This translates to the most yards per reception by far, which is 15.21 yards per catch to tight ends. Right now, the longest reception prop for Kyle Pitts. And once again, guys, this is what he does. This is within his wheelhouse. He's a longest reception guy, is at 17.5 receiving yards. This is an outlier. This is a definitive must bet on. I love this bet. This is one of my favorite locks of the week. I love Kyle Pitts' longest reception. I also like Kyle Pitts to find the end zone in this matchup. Kyle Pitts, we're bumping up into the A tier because this is a fantastic matchup. And we've seen a couple of nuke weeks against this Washington Commanders. We've seen at least one, and I like Kyle Pitts this week, so he's in the A tier. And then we got Zach Ertz in the C tier. He can easily go down to the E or F tier or whatever you want to fucking call it, because if Jaden Daniels doesn't play, he's going down there. If Jaden Daniels does play, he's going up to the B tier. Okay, so that's where I have him. And that's why we do these videos early, so we give you guys a heads up on where it's advantageous and where it's not. All right, this is I mean, shit, Tyler Higbee looks like an absolute cokehead in this video. In this picture. Let's be real. All right, we got the Indianapolis Colts. They are 3.5-point dogs. They're 3-0 coming into Los Angeles against the Rams. The over/under is 49.5. This is the highest implied point total on the week. So let's talk about it and where it's advantageous and where it's not. So for starters, it's not advantageous for either team. But when we look at the splits of the Indianapolis Colts going against better pass rushes, we tend to see a little bit more high quality targets towards Tyler Warren. So Tyler Warren for me is in the A tier based off of the quality of targets and the pass rush. We know that Daniel Jones is going to want to give the check down equity there because he's not going to have a lot of time to drop back and pass. And then Tyler Higbee is a must sit because it's just tough to project for him when he's borderline the 5th or 6th option in that offense. All right, next game, we got the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are 3-point underdogs coming to San Francisco. The over-under is 47. Game will be played in San Francisco. And the Jacksonville Jaguars allowed the 8th most receptions to tight ends. They're tied in that department at 5 per game. San Francisco is also tied San Francisco allows the 8th most targets per game at 8 targets to tight ends per game, and tied for 8th most receptions to tight ends with the Jacksonville Jaguars at 5 per game. And they allow 0.67 receiving touchdowns to tight ends. So pretty much every 3 quarters there's a touchdown allowed to a tight end there. So I do like Brenton Strange. Jake Tongues, for me, is not a start. He's not even a DFS play. We've tried to give him the opportunity several times, and it just hasn't contributed into touchdowns and production. Now, mind you, Mac Jones was at the helm. So if Brock Purdy starts, and it looks like Brock Purdy may start, this may boost him a little bit up as a DFS start, but I like Brenton Strange in this matchup. Brenton Strange is going to be in the C tier. And then, E tier, so sit for Jake Tongues. Next matchup, we got Mark Andrews and the Baltimore Ravens. Mark Andrews coming off of an astronomical performance. And we told you guys, if you guys have been listening, don't drop him, buy low. We like him. We haven't lost hope yet against Travis Kelce. And this guy looks terrible. But let's talk about the tail of the tape. Game kicks off at 4:25 p.m. Baltimore is visiting the Kansas City Chiefs. The Ravens are favored by 2.5 points. The over-under is 48.5, one of the highest implied point totals on the week. So let's talk about where it's advantageous. So the Baltimore Ravens tied for the third most receptions allowed to tight ends at 6.67. They allowed the second most receiving yards to opposing tight ends at 72.67 and the 10th most yards per reception at 10.90. This is a glaring vacancy and hold. Whereas KC is one of the better defenses in borderline every quantifiable measure, except for the most yards per reception to opposing tight ends. They actually give up the fourth most at 12.75 yards per reception. So when we go into the starts here, they're both definitive starts and they're both going to be in the B tier. And I think the B tier is kind of their floor, and we know what they're ceiling and what they're capable of doing. This next game, I like a lot. I like this game a lot. My tight end one happens to be in this game. So we got the Chicago Bears, who are 1-point underdogs, coming into Las Vegas. The over-under is 48. And let's talk about Brock Bowers versus Cole Kmet. And we're going to say Cole Kmet because even if we know if Loveland is healthy or not, Cole Kmet has been getting the vast majority of the snaps when you look at the splits. And shout out to the football guys who give us the snap count percentage on a weekly basis. They're fantastic. Great work there and great content from them. So let's talk about what the Chicago Bears allow. They are tied for the third most targets allowed per game at 9. They're tied for the most receptions allowed per game to opposing tight ends. So the most. This is the most advantageous matchup for tight ends in PPR format. They allow 8 receptions per game. The 11th most receiving yards to tight ends at 53.67. Whereas Las Vegas allows the second most yards per reception at 13.44. So Brock Bowers, we love his receptions prop. Kate Otten, we like, not Kate Otten, Cole Kmet, we like his longest receptions prop. Cole Kmet's going to be in the D tier, and then we're going to put Brock Bowers where he belongs in that S tier. He's my tight end one on the week. Absolutely love him. I think he's going to be fantastic. Let's talk about Sunday Night Football. We got the Micah Parsons revenge game or the Jerry Jones revenge game. Only one of them is playing this game, but I mean, you would swear that Jerry Jones is on the field, just how much shit he fucking talks. Anyway, Sunday Night Football, Green Bay Packers, 7-point favorites. Coming into Dallas, the over-under is 47.5, and I love both of these tight ends in this matchup. It's a fantastic matchup for both of these tight ends. Not necessarily on paper for Tucker Kraft, but the usage that Tucker Kraft gets is wonderful within the Matt LaFleur offense. And we know that the reliability is going to be there. When we see cover 2 shell, we anticipate that the crossers, the unders, and the posts are going to be wide open. And then you look at the Dallas Cowboys, they run it at 67% of the time. So this is a very advantageous matchup just based off of scheme and alignment for Tucker Kraft. And when he gets the ball, he's one of the scariest players to tackle. So yards after the catch is a fantastic thing. But it is actually more advantageous for Jake Ferguson. Jake Ferguson is a smash tight end this week, and we'll tell you why. The Packers allowed the second most targets to opposing tight ends at 9.67. They're tied for second most receptions at 7 receptions per game to opposing tight ends. Third most receiving yards at 71.67, 11th most yards per reception at 10.24. And when CD Lamb went down last week, we saw that Ferguson was hyper-focused. He caught almost every target. I thought he had like 13 receptions at some point, if not more. So he's a smash matchup. He's in a smash matchup. He's a smash tight end this week, and so is Tucker Kraft. Both of these tight ends, this is a shocker, are both going in the S tier. They're both must-starts, and I love both of these tight ends in this matchup. This next game has one of my sleepers of the week, and no, it's not Julian Hill. It's the first Monday Night Football game. This is another Monday night where we have 2 Monday Night Football games. We've got the New York Jets, who are 3-point underdogs coming into Miami. The over-under is 45. And we got Mason Taylor, the son of former Miami Dolphins Hall of Famer defensive end Jason Taylor. So the writing's on the wall. This is the perfect kind of story, right? The writing's on the wall against Julian Hill. And the only reason why we have Julian Hill here is because when you look at the snap share, shout out to football guys once again, he gets the most snaps. I don't know if there's going to be Darren Waller or whatnot, but it doesn't matter. These guys are definitive sit. They should not be rostered. They should not be on your lineup. There's no situation scenario where I'll ever bet on them. So let's talk about where it's advantageous. The Jets they're tied for the 7th most targets allowed by opposing teams when it comes to the tight end position at 7, tied for 8th most receptions to tight ends at 5. This production is probably going to go to either Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, or most definitely Devon Achane. So Julian Hill is not an option. If he is, shame on me. I'll apologize to you guys profusely, but I assure you he's not. Now, Miami, this is a very advantageous matchup, and Mason Taylor for me is a definitive start. I love him. I was so close to putting him in the A and S tier. I'm telling you, man. So the Dolphins allow for the fifth most targets to opposing tight ends, 7.67. Tied for allowing the fifth most receptions at 6 receptions, the fourth most receiving yards at 71.33, eighth most yards per reception at 11.89, and 0.67 TDs allowed per game. So every 3 quarters, they allow a touchdown to opposing tight ends. This is a fantastic matchup. It's a smash matchup, and I love Mason Taylor. Mason Taylor's in my B tier. If he's available on your waiver wires, I recommend you pick him up, and I recommend that you start him ahead of several of these tight ends. He's my tight end 13 on the week. That's how bullish I am on Mason Taylor this week. Love Mason Taylor, and Julian Hill's a sit. Yeah, Julian Hill's definitely a sit. All right, last game of the docket. We got the Cincinnati Bengals. And yes, you are not familiar with the guy who is in that tight end position on the screen for the Cincinnati Bengals. That is Drew Sample. And the reason why we have Drew Sample there is because he has at least 20% more snaps than the next tight end, whether it be Mike Gesicki or Noah Fant. And then we have Evan Ingram there. Should Evan Ingram be healthy? Obviously, we like Evan Ingram, and I will tell you guys why. The Cincinnati Bengals allow the fourth most receptions to tight ends at 6.33, the seventh most receiving yards at 59.33. And once again, they're in that big grouping of football teams that allow above average production of 0.67 touchdowns allowed per game to opposing tight ends. So this is a fantastic matchup when we're talking across the board in every quantifiable measure for Evan Ingram if Evan Ingram plays. If he doesn't, I'm not starting Lucas Kroll. I promise you that, and we're not even considering it. But Evan Ingram, if I knew he was starting today, if I knew he was healthy today, if I knew he was going to be 100% today, he would be in the S tier because of how advantageous this matchup is. We just saw TJ Hawkinson have his get right game. This is a get right game situation for Evan Ingram. And I know Sean Payton hates our fantasy football lineups, but I don't care. I'm just going based off of the ability that Evan Ingram has when he's on the field and what the Cincinnati Bengals allow, which is a lot of production to the opposing tight end. Denver, on the other hand, they allowed the ninth most receiving yards, to opposing tight ends at 56 yards per game and the eighth most yards per reception at 12. So this would be a fantastic matchup if we knew who to trust. I'm not trusting Drew Sample. He's not a pickup, so he's a sit for me. And we're going to put Evan Ingram in the C tier, but if Evan Ingram is healthy, he is going to be bumped up into my top 14 tight end rankings because it's one of the best matchups in football. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our start sits for all positions. You could check out our quarterback start sits for week 4, our running back start sits for week 4, our wide receiver start sits for week 4. I don't know what I'm doing with my hands, but I'm just so excited that we got this done. Shout out to our sponsors, Bettor Vision, best place to consolidate all things fantasy and betting into one space. It's a free download, free app. It's a fantastic app. Shout out to the owners there and our fantastic sponsors. Shout out to our sponsors, Drafters Fantasy. Use promo code DISCO to tail one of these locks and one of these props. And if you use promo code DISCO, we'll double your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. So your first bet is on me. And shout out to the Bull Rush Fantasy. It's the best combination of betting and fantasy. We call it fantasy betting, and it's fantastic. Check out Bull Rush as well. If you guys need fantasy football advice, that is not within one of our live YouTube streams, and we'll be live Thursday at 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. answering all of your start sits. And then we'll be live on Saturday from 6 p.m. potentially to 8 p.m. answering all your start sits. And then Sunday morning at 8 a.m. to kick off in this is all Eastern time, 8 a.m. till 9:30 a.m. Eastern time on Sunday morning because there is a game in Dublin. Shout out to my partner, my business partner, Sleez. If you guys want our fantasy football advice, and this is what I was getting at off of the fantasy football live streams, just sign up on the guys Patreon. Link is in the description. It'll be pinned there for you guys, and we'll give you guys all access coaching for trades, waiver wire targets, just how to fix your team if your team is struggling 0-3. I appreciate you guys for rocking with me. Like the video if you haven't, subscribe if you haven't, and until next time, guys, peace.